He said I was just a cleaner, that I didn't deserve to be there, at his wedding, the wedding I'd spent my whole life saving for. But on that day, everything changed. My name is Eleanor Vance. For 30 years, I pushed mops, scrubbed floors, polished surfaces until they gleamed, day in and day out. The smell of disinfectant became as familiar as my own skin. It wasn't glamorous work, certainly not the kind that earns you accolades or turns heads. Most people barely noticed me, just another quiet presence moving through the background of their busy lives. They saw the uniform, maybe the bucket, but they didn't see the why. They didn't see the engine that drove every aching movement, every early morning, every late night. That engine was my son, Ethan. He came into my life when he was just a little boy, lost and needing a home from Harmony House Children's Shelter. Adopting him, it wasn't just signing papers. It was a vow whispered in my heart, a promise to give him everything I could, everything he deserved. I might not have been able to give him fancy clothes or exotic vacations, but I could give him stability, a roof over his head, and a future. So I cleaned offices downtown. I cleaned Mrs. Henderson's house on Elm Street. I cleaned the local diner after everyone else had gone home. I counted every penny, every dollar, tucking them away in a worn bank book. It wasn't about building wealth for myself. No, my one driving purpose was for Ethan. School books, clothes that fit, a warm bed, food on the table, and eventually, something bigger, something that would give him a real start. That's why I bought the house. A small place, yes, but a place for him and his new wife, Sarah, to begin their life together. My proudest achievement, built on 30 years of hard work. And then, the wedding invitations arrived. A beautiful card, sealed with anticipation. This was it, the culmination. And for his wedding gift, I planned to give him the rest of it. Every single dollar I had managed to squirrel away beyond the house. It was a substantial sum, enough to ease their way. Maybe help with future plans. Children, perhaps. All of it, freely given. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? You give your best, your everything, to see your child happy. But when I heard those words, when my own son looked at me, his eyes holding something akin to embarrassment and dismissiveness, and said I was just a cleaner, that I didn't deserve to attend, something inside me shattered. 30 years. It felt like a blink when he said those words. Every sacrifice, every ache, every dream I'd poured into him, reduced to just a cleaner. The very thing that had allowed me to give him the life he had became the reason I wasn't good enough. But before we get to that day, that pivotal day at Oakwood Manor, let me take you back to a time when hope was my currency, and Ethan was my entire world. Adopting a child, it wasn't just a decision I made one afternoon. It was a promise, a silent vow whispered in the quiet halls of Harmony House Children's Shelter. I remember walking through, the air thick with the scent of lemon polish and something else. A deep, quiet longing that mirrored the one in my own heart. I wasn't a young woman anymore, and my own path hadn't been easy. There were missed chances, struggles, and a certain kind of loneliness that only deepened with age. But as I passed the rooms, saw the small faces pressed against the glass, something shifted. And then I saw him, Ethan. He was maybe 5 or 6, with wide, curious eyes and a hesitant smile. He didn't clamor for attention like some of the others. He just watched. And when I stopped, when our eyes met, he walked right up and gently took my hand. It wasn't a demand, just a simple, trusting gesture. In that instant, something clicked. He felt like mine. A little piece of the world that was meant to be with me. I knew life wouldn't be easy. I didn't have a high-paying job, no wealthy family to fall back on. My skills were practical, keeping things clean, making a little bit stretch a long way. That's why I chose the work I did. Being a cleaner might not have offered prestige, but it offered stability. It offered hours that allowed me to be home when Ethan was home, to help with homework, to cook him dinner, to tuck him in at night. It gave me the time to be a mother in a way that other jobs might not have. Every day was a balancing act, early mornings before the sun was up, late nights after Ethan was asleep. Sometimes I'd work 2 or even 3 different cleaning jobs in a day, just to make sure there was enough. Enough for rent on our small apartment on Elm Street, enough for school supplies, enough for the occasional treat, an ice cream cone or a trip to the park. I patched clothes, cooked simple meals, and learned to fix things myself. There were moments of exhaustion, sure, moments when my back ached and my hands were raw. But then I'd look at Ethan, see him laughing, learning, growing, and the weariness would fade. He was a quiet child, sometimes a little withdrawn, but when he smiled, it was like sunshine. We'd spend evenings reading together or building forts out of blankets in the living room. Those were the moments I cherished, the simple, warm moments that felt like the real treasures of life. I taught him everything I knew: how to be kind, how to work hard, how to save a little bit of money, how to stand up for what's right. I poured all my hopes, all my love, all my energy into raising him, praying I was giving him the foundation he needed to build a happy, successful life. My best friend, Susan Bennett, was my rock during those years. A pragmatic, kind woman who always knew when to offer a cup of tea or a word of encouragement. "You're doing a wonderful job, Eleanor," she'd say, her voice firm but gentle. "He's a good boy because you're a good mother." Her belief in me, in us, meant the world. Every parent wants the best for their child, wants to give them opportunities they never had. But what happens when your best, all that effort and sacrifice, isn't what they truly value? It was a question I never consciously asked myself, but perhaps, deep down, a quiet fear always lingered. This promise, this unwavering focus on Ethan. It led me down a path I never expected, a path paved with good intentions, leading straight towards his future. But paths can take sudden, painful turns, and mine was about to do just that. Just weeks before the wedding, a simple cut on my leg, something I barely noticed while working, turned into a cage, a stubborn, spreading infection that landed me in a sterile white room at City General Hospital just a few weeks shy of the biggest day of Ethan's life. The pain was bad, yes, a throbbing fire that made sleep a distant luxury. But the worst part was the stillness. Being forced to lie there, unable to move, unable to do. My thoughts weren't on my own discomfort, though they were, as always, on Ethan. The wedding was so close. Had they finalized the seating chart? Did Sarah find the right flowers? Would they be warm enough at Oakwood Manor in late spring? Every worry circled back to him, to their day. Lying in that bed, I felt a pang of real sadness knowing I might not be there to see him stand at the altar, to see him start his new chapter. Dr. Fisher, a kind man with tired eyes, explained the situation. The infection was deep, requiring treatment, monitoring, attending a wedding, being on my feet, navigating crowds. It was out of the question for the foreseeable future. Disappointment washed over me, thick and heavy. Missing it, after everything, felt unfair. But even then, my mind raced ahead, trying to find a way to contribute, to be there for him, even from afar. The house was ready, their names on the deed. But I had more. The rest of the money. The culmination of those 30 years of penny pinching, originally earmarked for a slightly larger house. Maybe, someday, if things went really well. Now, lying there, it felt like the only thing left I could give, a tangible representation of my love, my support, his secure future. I pictured handing him that bank book, or perhaps a cashier's check, seeing the relief in his eyes, knowing they wouldn't have to struggle the way I had. It would ensure they had a strong start, a cushion to build on. That money, it wasn't just savings, it was 30 years of sweat, hope, and dreams for him. Every single penny represented a choice to postpone a new coat, to eat simple food, to skip little comforts, all so that he could have more. It was the ultimate expression of my unwavering love, a silent promise to always be his safety net. Ethan called, of course. His voice was hurried, laced with that familiar slight impatience he sometimes had. "Mom, how are you? The leg, is it really that bad? You have to be at the wedding. You know, everyone's expecting you. His concern felt conditional, more focused on my presence at the event and, implicitly, the gift, than on my actual well-being. He mentioned needing to discuss wedding details, which I knew translated to the money. My heart ached a little more. Even now, sick and confined, it was about what I could provide. Still, I held on to the thought of the gift. If I couldn't be there in person, my sacrifice, my life's work, could be there for him, ensuring his happiness. Lying there, weak and disappointed, I thought the worst thing was missing his big day. I was wrong, so profoundly, terribly wrong. The real shock was yet to come. Just outside the thin privacy curtain pulled around my hospital bed, they didn't know I was awake. The pain medication had me drifting in and out, my eyes half closed, my body heavy, but my ears were wide open. Dr. Fisher was there, checking on my leg. Ethan and Sarah had just arrived. I heard their voices, low at first, then growing louder, comfortable, assuming I was lost in a medicated haze. Her condition isn't improving as fast as we had hoped, I heard Dr. Fisher say, his tone genuinely concerned. If this infection doesn't respond, we might have to consider. He trailed off, likely glancing towards me. Then, Ethan spoke. His voice was casual, almost dismissive. Yeah, well, she's getting older, and honestly, this probably works out better anyway. My breath hitched, works out better. Sarah's voice, syrupy sweet when speaking to me, turned sharp, impatient. Exactly. It's perfect. Victoria can stand with you. Ethan, it looks so much better. Her parents are practically society figures. What would they think seeing, you know? She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't have to. I knew. Seeing me, Eleanor Vance, the cleaner. Victoria has class. Connections. Ethan continued, cementing the insult. She actually looks like she belongs at Oakwood Manor. And who knows? Maybe she'll feel generous. She's clearly got money. They laughed. A light, careless sound that scraped across my soul. Then, something colder. And the leg? Sarah asked. Is it bad enough she definitely can't come? We don't need any drama. No, she'll be stuck here, Ethan confirmed. Probably for a while. It's convenient. Less complicated. Dr. Fisher cleared his throat. Ethan, she's your mother. She's given you everything. This infection is serious. She might even need... Look, Doc, thanks, but we've got it handled. Ethan cut him off. My real mother is... Well, she's excited to be there. This is for appearances. You understand? For the guests, for Sarah's family. It just needs to look right. My heart didn't just ache anymore. It was being crushed, pounded into dust with every word. They didn't just see me as a cleaner. They saw me as an obstacle, an embarrassment, a source of potential drama. My illness wasn't a tragedy. It was convenient. And the money. My life savings. They spoke of it as an entitlement, something Victoria might provide, completely ignoring the fact that I had already provided everything. I lay there, rigid, the sheet damp with cold sweat. Tears tracked silently down my temples, disappearing into my hair. The pain in my legs suddenly felt insignificant compared to the ache in my chest. 30 years, all the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the unwavering love, reduced to a simple calculation of social status and potential inheritance. Every word was a hammer blow, shattering the picture I had carried in my heart for 30 years. Who was this person I had raised? This stranger who so easily discarded the very hand that had fed him, clothed him, sheltered him. The wedding gift, the money I had planned to give him, felt tainted, a final, bitter irony. My hand, resting on the bedside table, curled instinctively around the worn bank book. Slowly, deliberately, I tucked it away, deep in the pocket of my robe. Not as a gift anymore, but as a secret. But the truth rarely comes alone. And the next layer of betrayal was waiting, hidden in plain sight, on a small screen I would find later. They left soon after, their laughter echoing down the hall. Ethan, ever careless, left his phone on my bedside table. He thought I was asleep, harmless, but the moment was too heavy, the betrayal too sharp for any lingering drowsiness. My hands, usually clumsy from years of scrubbing, moved with surprising dexterity. I knew his password, his birthday, a detail he probably thought I'd forgotten, but of course, I hadn't. Unlocking the phone felt like opening a Pandora's box, and there it was. A long string of messages, photos, call logs, all with a contact simply labeled Victoria S. Ethan had been in touch with Victoria Sterling, his biological mother, for months. They exchanged frequent messages, not just superficial pleasantries, but detailed conversations about his life, his aspirations, and his upcoming wedding. Victoria Sterling. The name itself sounded elevated, refined. The photos they had exchanged showed a woman who looked outwardly successful, polished, draped in expensive clothes, a far cry from the worn aprons and practical shoes that defined my life. Ethan and Sarah craved her status, her money, the shiny veneer she projected. But as I scrolled deeper, a different story began to emerge. There were glimpses of her past, veiled references, things Ethan asked about, and the chilling realization dawned: Victoria Sterling wasn't some long-lost mother desperately searching for the child she'd been forced to give up. No, Victoria Sterling was the one who had walked away, who had made it clear years ago when I quietly tried to find her, not to burden her, but simply to have information for Ethan if he ever asked, that she wanted nothing to do with him, that he was a complication, a past she had left behind. I remembered that brief, painful conversation years ago. Her voice was cold, dismissive. A child from back then. Look, I've built a new life. He's your responsibility now. Don't contact me again. Ever. She hadn't been forced into anything. She had chosen her path, a path that didn't include a son, and now, years later, she reappeared, not out of maternal love, but perhaps out of curiosity, or sensing an opportunity. The messages hinted at her subtle probing about Ethan's career, his new house, the house I bought. They hinted at her subtly flaunting her own seemingly comfortable life. Victoria Sterling, the woman they believed would add prestige to their wedding, who they hoped would open doors and wallets, was, in fact, someone who had discarded Ethan like unwanted baggage. She wanted the appearance of connection, the reflected glory of his success, which again was built on my back. But the messages lacked the warmth, the genuine concern I, as his mother, had shown him every single day for 30 years. They thought they were so clever, building their future on lies, chasing a phantom of status and wealth while discarding the real, messy, hard-working love that had raised him. They thought I was just a simple cleaner, easily fooled, easily manipulated, but they underestimated the woman they called just a cleaner. They underestimated my quiet observations, my deep understanding of Ethan, and my newfound clarity born from pain. Looking at the photos of Victoria, so put together and elegant, then glancing down at my own hand, still bearing the marks of my work, the contrast was stark, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, who the truly valuable person was in this equation. It wasn't the one who chased appearances and abandoned responsibilities. It was the one who stayed, the one who cleaned, who worked, who sacrificed, not for status, but for love. With this new understanding, the hospital room became less of a prison and more of a planning ground. Lying there, the physical pain felt secondary. My mind, sharp and clear, began to formulate a different kind of plan. It was time to change the script they thought they were writing. It was time for the truth to make its appearance. My recovery wasn't just about healing my leg, it was about healing my spirit. The physical pain was a constant dull ache, but the emotional wound, that was the one I truly needed to mend. Lying in that hospital bed, the silence no longer felt like a cage, but a space to breathe, to think, to finally put myself first. 30 years, always putting him first. What would it feel like? just for a little while, to put myself first. The first thing I did was call Susan. Her voice, warm with concern, was a balm. I told her everything, not with hysterics, but with a quiet, measured recounting of the betrayal. Susan listened patiently, her silence occasionally punctuated by a sharp intake of breath, or a quiet curse aimed at Ethan and Sarah. "Oh, Eleanor," she said softly when I finished, "those ungrateful... I just don't know what to say." "Don't say anything, Susan," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. "Just help me. Help me find the best doctor, the best treatment for this leg. I need to get better. For me." Susan, true to her nature, sprang into action. Within days, she'd pulled strings, made calls, and found me a top orthopedic specialist, not affiliated with City General Hospital, a doctor who saw me as a patient, not just an inconvenience in someone else's life story. My treatment plan was revised, more aggressive, focusing on not just managing the infection, but ensuring a full recovery. The physical therapy was hard. Every stretch, every step was a battle against pain and weakness. But with each small victory, being able to sit up for longer, taking a few steps with a walker, I felt my resolve hardening. This wasn't just about walking again, it was about standing tall again. Ethan called and called and called. His messages became increasingly insistent, no longer even bothering with the pretense of concern for my health. It was all about the wedding. "Mom, the date is getting closer. We need to talk about the arrangements. Did you get my last message? Please call me back." And, inevitably, we really need to figure out the wedding gift, the finances. I didn't answer, not one call, not one message. Each unanswered ring, each ignored notification, felt like a small act of reclaiming my time, my energy, my peace. It wasn't about being cruel, it was about setting a boundary I should have set decades ago. I was no longer his unlimited resource, his silent benefactor. The hospital staff noticed a change. The quiet, weary woman who had arrived faded, replaced by someone with a newfound quiet strength in her eyes. Dr. Fisher would stop by, chat not just about my leg, but about my day, asking about my plans once I was discharged. He seemed to genuinely care, a stark contrast to the casual dismissal I had overheard. Susan visited often, bringing books, sharing stories from the outside world that no longer felt distant and unattainable. We talked for hours, not just about Ethan, but about me, about my past dreams, my forgotten hobbies, the person I was before becoming solely Ethan's mother. It felt strange, almost foreign, to talk about myself, but liberating too. The physical pain was still there, a reminder of my vulnerability, but the emotional burden, the constant worry, the need to be everything for everyone, that was slowly lifting. Lying in that hospital bed, looking out the window at the world moving on without me, I didn't feel left behind. I felt free. Free from expectations. Free from the need to constantly provide. Free to finally, truly, breathe for myself. The wedding day was approaching. They thought I would be stuck in that hospital bed, quiet and defeated. They were wrong. My leg was healing, my spirit was stronger, and I had a different kind of entrance planned. I wasn't on the guest list. Not the official one. Anyway, after all, who would invite just a cleaner to a wedding at the Grand Ballroom at Oakwood Manor? They wanted Polish, prestige, appearances, but I was on a mission to deliver a truth they desperately hoped would remain hidden under the glittering facade of their perfect day. Susan drove me. My leg was much better, strong enough with support, but navigating a large event was still challenging, so the wheelchair was a practical necessity. Susan helped me dress, not in anything extravagant, but in a simple, elegant dress in a lovely shade of sapphire blue, a color that made me feel visible, not invisible, like the cleaner uniform did. Susan fussed over my hair, smoothed my collar. "You look wonderful, Eleanor," she said, her eyes full of support. "Hold your head high." Oakwood Manor was as grand as the name suggested. Soaring ceilings, polished marble, the air filled with the murmur of well-dressed guests and the scent of expensive flowers. We arrived quietly, slipping in during the flurry of late arrivals. Susan positioned me near the back, a little out of the main thoroughfare, but with a clear view of the front where the ceremony would take place, and where Ethan and Sarah were currently mingling with guests. And there she was, Victoria Sterling, exactly as the photos had shown. Elegant, poised, laughing with a group of people. She wore a stunning gown, pearls gleaming at her throat. She looked every bit the part of the proud mother, and standing beside her, looking flushed with pride, was Ethan. He saw me then. His eyes widened, just for a fraction of a second. Surprise, quickly masked by a strained smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sarah saw me too, her smile freezing, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face before she recovered her composure. Victoria glanced over, a brief, dismissive look before turning back to her conversation. I watched them, a quiet observer in their carefully constructed tableau. I saw Ethan introduce Victoria to guests, puffing up his chest a little, emphasizing her presence. I saw Sarah subtly steer conversations away from my corner of the room, and I heard the whispers, low voices, behind cupped hands, glancing towards me, then towards Victoria. Which one is the real mother? He has two mothers. Oh, that's the adoptive one, isn't she? Looks like, well, you know. Apparently, the other one is quite successful. Runs in the family, I suppose. The casual judgment, the easy dismissal of my existence based on appearance, the assumption that Victoria, the one who abandoned him, was inherently superior. It stung, but it also solidified my resolve. They wanted this wedding to be a statement about who they were, about the future they were claiming, a future built on appearances, on status, on denying the inconvenient past. I looked at Ethan, smiling and charming, playing the role of the grateful son to Victoria, while ignoring the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. I looked at Sarah, her eyes calculating, focused on the right people, the right connections. I looked at Victoria, basking in the attention, playing the part of the doting mother she had never been. The air in the room, despite the festive decorations and polite chatter, felt thick with unspoken truths, with calculated performances. They wanted a perfect picture for their perfect wedding. They thought they had erased me, or at least confined me to a corner where I couldn't disturb their illusion. Little did they know, I wasn't there to watch their picture. I was there to hand them the missing piece. The truth. The music played, the champagne flowed. The surface was smooth and sparkling, but under the surface, tension simmered, and the real show hadn't even started yet. It was time to speak the truth they desperately wanted to keep hidden. Silence can be powerful. For 30 years, my love was a silent force, expressed through actions, not words. But sometimes, when lies have built a castle, you have to use your voice to bring it down. The moment came during the toasts. After the predictable speeches full of generic well-wishes, the minister, perhaps prompted by Ethan to extend a gesture of politeness to the adoptive mother, turned to me, and perhaps, he announced to the room, Eleanor Vance, Ethan's adoptive mother, would like to say a few words. A hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to my corner. Ethan looked visibly uncomfortable. Sarah shot a quick, venomous glance my way. And Victoria. Victoria simply smiled condescendingly. A look that clearly said, "Let's get this over with." They expected a few teary, awkward sentences from the simple cleaner. I took a deep breath. My leg ached. My hands were trembling slightly. But my voice was steady. "Thank you," I began, projecting my voice clearly across the room. "Thank you for inviting me, in a way, to this beautiful wedding." I paused, letting the double meaning hang in the air. For 30 years, I had one purpose: to give Ethan a good life, a life I never had. I cleaned, I saved, I sacrificed, not because I expected anything in return, but because I loved him. I bought him a house, put money aside. Everything was for his future. I glanced at Ethan, his strained smile now completely gone, replaced by a look of apprehension. Sarah was rigid beside him. Recently, I continued, my tone softening slightly. I've been in the hospital. An infection. It was difficult. And while I was there, I heard some things. Things that made me realize not everyone values the same things. Some value status, appearances, what others can give them. I looked directly at Ethan and Sarah, and some even see illness as convenient. A murmur went through the guests. Whispers grew louder. Victoria's smile had vanished. I also learned something else, I said, my voice gaining strength. I learned about the past, about choices made, about beginnings and endings. I turned my gaze towards Victoria Sterling, who was now looking distinctly uneasy. You see, I wasn't just a cleaner. I was the woman who stayed, the woman who chose to love and raise a little boy who needed a home, while his biological mother, Victoria, the one you've heard so much about tonight, chose a different path, a path that led her to abandon him completely, years ago. Gasps erupted around the room. Ethan's face turned a shocking white, then flushed crimson. Sarah's eyes were wide with panic and fury. Victoria stood frozen for a moment, then visibly bristled, opening her mouth to protest. But I wasn't finished. I tried to find her once, years ago, I said, speaking directly to the stunned guests now. Not to cause trouble, just in case Ethan ever needed to know. And she made it very clear she wanted nothing to do with him, that he was a burden she had left behind. I reached into the pocket of my dress, not for the bank book, for something else, something Susan had helped me prepare, a simple folder. Perhaps, I said, pulling out a few documents. Ethan wasn't aware of all the details. Perhaps he simply believed the narrative he was told. But the truth has a way of coming out. I held up a copy of an old letter, or maybe a printout of a chilling message, evidence of choices made and responsibilities ignored. It wasn't about the money anymore, I said, my voice calmer now, the initial rush of adrenaline fading into a quiet resolve. It wasn't about demanding gratitude or recognition. It was about showing everyone, including myself, the true cost of disregard, the true value of love and loyalty. And sometimes, the only way to do that is to shine a light on what's been hidden. Ethan was shaking his head, his eyes darting between me, Victoria, and the stunned faces in the crowd. Sarah looked like she might explode. Victoria was whispering frantically to someone beside her, her face contorted with anger and humiliation. The perfect wedding facade crumbled, the glittering illusion shattered, revealing the raw, ugly truth beneath. But the story wasn't over yet. Oh no. Life has a way of delivering its own consequences, sometimes from the most unexpected places. You reap what you sow, and their harvest, on that day, was undeniably bitter. The room erupted after I finished speaking. Whispers turned to loud chatter, guests pointing, eyes wide. Ethan stood there, frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and humiliation. Sarah, furious that her carefully planned day had imploded, rounded on him, hissing accusations about your messy life and making a fool of me. Victoria, pale and cornered, was trying desperately to regain control, her earlier poise shattering. And then, as if drawn by the chaos, a new figure appeared. A distinguished-looking man, radiating an aura of wealth and authority, Walter Thorne. He walked directly towards Victoria, his expression thunderous. "Victoria!" he boomed, his voice cutting through the noise. "What in God's name is going on here, and who is this woman?" He gestured towards me, then back to the scene. Victoria stammered, tried to explain, but Walter cut her off. "Enough, I heard quite enough chatter on the way in. It seems your past has caught up with you, doesn't it? And here I thought you were finally respectable, bringing this here at a public event." His gaze swept over Ethan, a look of pure disdain on his face. "This is precisely why I told you to keep your history buried and involving me in this circus. We're done. Victoria, pack your things. You won't be staying at the penthouse another night." The gasp from the crowd was almost deafening. Victoria Sterling, the woman of status and elegance, revealed not as a successful independent woman, but as a dependent. Her carefully constructed facade crumbled completely, exposed by the very man who had financed it. She let out a cry of despair and fury as Walter Thorne turned and walked away, leaving her reeling. Sarah didn't hesitate. With a final, disgusted look at Ethan, she ripped off her veil, threw it to the ground, and stormed out, her parents trailing behind her, looking appalled. The dream wedding was over, just like that. Ethan was left standing alone, between two women whose lives had just been irrevocably changed, primarily because of him. He looked lost, bewildered, the privileged world he'd taken for granted collapsing around him. Guests avoided his eyes, moving away. Uncomfortable witnesses to a very public downfall. The house I bought for him, the car I'd helped him maintain. They felt meaningless now, symbols of a support system he had actively tried to dismantle. I would later learn that, in his desperation, he made impulsive decisions, perhaps selling things off cheap, spiraling downwards rapidly. I didn't stay to watch the full aftermath. Susan helped me make my way out, through the stunned crowd. We got into the car and drove away from Oakwood Manor, leaving the echoes of shattered dreams behind. The calls started a few days later. Ethan, pleading, not for forgiveness, at first, for money. "Mom, you have to help me. Sarah left Victoria's gone, I don't have anything." Then, when I didn't answer, the tone shifted. "Mom, please, I was wrong. I'm sorry. Can't we talk? Can't you just help me get back on my feet?" I listened to the voicemails, read the desperate texts, sent to the number he had dismissed just weeks before. There was no anger left in me, just a profound sadness, a sense of closure. Yes. But also the quiet grief of mourning someone who was still alive, but fundamentally lost to me. It's a difficult lesson, to learn that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone who has hurt you is to let them face the consequences they created. To let go. His path was his own now. He had chosen it, deliberately, when he decided that money and status were more important than the messy, imperfect, but boundless love that had raised him. Mine was finally clear. Clear for the first time in 30 years. The weight was gone. It was time to build something new. For me, they took my past, in a way. The past I had built around him, the future I had envisioned for him, but they couldn't take my future, or my purpose. The house I'd bought for Ethan, it no longer felt like a symbol of love, but a monument to what could have been. I made the difficult decision to sell it. The money, combined with the rest of my savings, was a substantial sum, more than enough, certainly to live comfortably. I could have retired, traveled, finally enjoyed the fruits of my labor, but something felt incomplete. The deep-seated need to nurture, to build, was still there, just redirected. I thought back to Harmony House, the place where my journey as a mother began, the faces of the children there, waiting, hoping, and the mothers, young and struggling, facing challenges I understood all too well. An idea began to form. I didn't need a grand mansion or a life of leisure. I needed to plant seeds of hope, not just for one person, but for many. Working with Susan, who was thrilled to see me investing in myself and others, I established a small foundation. Nothing huge or corporate, but a modest fund dedicated to supporting Harmony House and providing assistance to single mothers trying to get on their feet, helping with childcare, a little extra for rent, connecting them with resources, small things, but they could make a world of difference. And as I began to focus outwards, something shifted inwards. The emptiness that had settled after the wedding drama slowly began to fill. I started doing things just for me. I unearthed my old paintbrushes, long neglected, setting up a small easel by the window. I began to paint again, simple landscapes, still lifes, whatever caught my eye. My hands, calloused from cleaning, discovered a new kind of touch, delicate and deliberate, mixing colors on a palette. I also rediscovered the simple joy of connecting with the earth. I rented a small plot at the community garden near my new, smaller apartment, digging in the soil, planting seeds, watching things grow. It was incredibly therapeutic. There was a quiet rhythm to it, a certainty. You put in the work, You tend to the fragile life, and you see the results. No complex emotional calculations, just the honest exchange of effort and growth. I started volunteering more regularly at Harmony House, reading to the children, helping with activities, their open hearts, their ready smiles. They were a balm to my soul, and I met other mothers, brave, resilient women facing daunting odds. Sharing stories, offering a listening ear, providing a little bit of help from the fund. It felt meaningful. It felt real. Maybe the greatest love isn't the one you give hoping it will be returned, but the one you give simply because you can. Finding joy in planting seeds of hope, watching them sprout, and knowing you played a small part in helping something beautiful grow. Susan would visit my garden plot, admiring my tomatoes or the cheerful sunflowers I love to paint. "You're glowing, Eleanor," she'd say, her eyes full of genuine pleasure. And for the first time in a long time, I believed her. The lines on my face were still there, marks of years of hard work, but they seemed softer now. My eyes held a different light. Years passed. Ethan faded into the background of my life. The calls eventually stopped. The silence was no longer heavy with sadness, but light with possibility. But the lessons remained, and the future I built was brighter than any future I had ever imagined for myself. It wasn't about houses or money or the approval of others. It was a future filled with something priceless: purpose, peace, and the quiet satisfaction of a life well lived, not for others, but for its own sake. They wanted money. They craved status, appearances, the kind of surface-level success that glitters but has no depth. They wanted money, and in chasing it, they lost everything: me, each other, whatever fragile sense of self-worth they might have possessed. And I found treasure, not in a bank book, but in a life rebuilt, brick by brick, on a foundation of self-respect and genuine connection. Looking back, the contrast is stark. Victoria Sterling, the woman who had wealth and status but chose to abandon her child, ended up losing her comfortable life, her dignity, exposed for what she was. Sarah Jenkins, driven by greed and social climbing, lost her intended husband and the perfect future she envisioned. And Ethan, who chased after the shadow of wealth and status, who dismissed the quiet love that had sustained him, found himself utterly alone. I would occasionally hear news through the grapevine, whispers filtering back through Susan or other acquaintances. Ethan was struggling, moving from place to place, unable to hold down a stable job, his charm wearing thin without the backing he'd taken for granted. The people he'd tried so hard to impress, the ones who valued status over substance, wanted nothing to do with him once he had neither. It was a harsh lesson, delivered by life itself, while a part of me, a tiny, maternal flicker, felt a pang of sadness for the lost boy. The larger part knew this was the harvest he had sown. My own life unfolded with a different kind of richness. My small apartment felt like a palace because it was truly mine, filled with things I loved: my paintings, the books I finally had time to read, the scent of fresh herbs from my garden plot. The people in my life weren't there because of what I could give them, but because of who I was: Susan, always steadfast; the other gardeners, sharing tips and smiles; the staff and children at Harmony House, whose simple gratitude was more precious than any gem; the mothers I helped, whose resilience inspired me every day. True wealth isn't counted in dollars, not in the size of your house or the car you drive. It's counted in lives touched, in love given freely, in the peace you find within yourself. It's the warmth of a child's hand, the quiet satisfaction of creating something beautiful, the strength of a true friendship, and sometimes, the greatest gift you can receive is the courage to walk away from what no longer serves your soul, even if that what was once your entire world. My journey wasn't the one I planned. It was filled with unexpected turns, deep pain, and profound loss. But it was also a journey of rediscovery, of resilience, of finding a purpose that was truly mine. It was a journey from cleaning floors for one, to building a new foundation for many, and the future I built was brighter than any future I had ever imagined for myself. It was a future filled with something priceless. This was my journey, and if you found a piece of your own story in mine, what lesson did this journey truly teach me? It taught me the strength I never knew I had. It taught me that, for too long, I had defined myself solely by my role as a mother, by what I could do, give, and sacrifice for someone else. I had confused my purpose with someone else's potential. The greatest lesson wasn't about being betrayed, or even about the money. It was about understanding that my value as a person doesn't depend on whether or not I'm seen, or appreciated, or recognized by anyone else, not even my own child. My value is inherent. It's in the effort I put in, the kindness I offer, the resilience I discovered when I thought I had none left. True strength isn't just enduring hardship. It's knowing when to walk away from what is toxic, when to stand up for yourself, and when to choose a different path. It's accepting the painful truth and deciding to use it not as a burden, but as fuel to build something better. And I learned that love, real, lasting love, isn't blind sacrifice. It requires respect, mutual care, and yes, healthy boundaries. It's the kind of love I found reflected back at me in the eyes of the children at Harmony House, in the grateful smiles of the mothers I could help, and in the quiet companionship of a true friend like Susan. Sitting here now, perhaps in my little garden, watching the sunflowers turn their faces to the sun, I feel a profound sense of peace. The ache in my leg is a distant memory. The ache in my heart has healed. The past is just that, the past. What matters is the present, the gentle joy of a life lived authentically, intentionally, for the first time in a very long time. I am Eleanor Vance, not just a cleaner, not just a mother, but a woman who faced the storm, found her footing, and bloomed anyway. My hope is that sharing this story, this very personal journey, might resonate with some of you watching. Perhaps you faced disappointment from someone you loved, or felt unseen and undervalued, or wondered if your sacrifices truly mattered in the end. Maybe you're carrying a burden that feels too heavy to bear alone. If any part of my story has touched you, if it sparked a flicker of recognition or given you pause for thought, I invite you to share your own reflections. What does value truly mean to you? Beyond the surface, how do you find your own purpose when the path you expected disappears? How do you learn to put yourself first, even just for a little while, without feeling guilty? Your experiences matter, your strength matters, and sharing them can be a powerful act, for yourself and for others. If you'd like to join a community that explores these deeper journeys of life, resilience, and finding meaning in the unexpected, please consider subscribing to the channel. There are so many stories out there, so many lessons to learn from one another. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, truly listening.